Butterfly, a tiny padlocked metal cage, this has been my long abode. I forced my precious wings to fold, till my soul became of age. I never saw my true colours, I never spread my wings. They fluttered at the thought, they wished to hear the key. My wings and I so wished that we'd someday be free, and yet it was my colours, intense and bright and new. Meshed metal melted mysteriously. I flew and flew and flew towards clear-coloured azure skies, scattered with golden angel dust. Finally, my wings and I have claimed our precious, rightful space. I am the colours. I am the wings. I hold the key. I now am free.
Lynn, hello. How wonderful to see you.
Always good to see you, Lenina, even if it's over a screen. But hey, energy is energy.
Exactly. And so, Lynn, we are meeting today to speak about this extraordinary book that you have written, Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me, Book 1. And it is a book which I've read about healing and transformation. And I think just to kick us off, if you can talk about why you wrote this book and how this book came about.
Sure. The book was really birthed from a very, very traumatic experience, a near-death experience, in fact, at the age of 15. I was sexually brutalized to a point that I had nearly died, but came back, crossed over, and it was not my time yet. I was spared life. And so it was not so much, I don't think I was spared from death to simply tell my story. I think I was spared from death to share the lessons that had led to the triumph of just the space that I wanted to be in, and that was one of a victor and not of a victim. So while the book was birthed out of that experience, Lenina, and you have read the book certainly is not about rape. The book is about healing and it's about transformation. It touches on universal principles like freedom, captivity, forgiveness, fear. It touches on those principles that ultimately lead to authentic freedom in the highest of ways. And yeah, it's definitely not just about rape. I would love to see it as a symbol of healing and as a symbol of transformation. That would be able to edge others on in terms of living their best lives. The fact that we are never products of our experiences in as much as we become products of our responses to those experiences. And that really is what the book is about. This book was also never about my story, Lenina. This book, and I think I mention it in my introduction, that this book is a representation of many, many untold stories, that it salutes the Nenes and the Jessies of the world, those who never got to live in order to tell their stories, but it's also beyond just those who have physically died. It's about those who metaphorically died on the inside and did not feel worthy enough beyond that trauma to share with the world. Because remember, we're dealing here with stigmatization, however irrational, and we're dealing with shame, however irrational. And I think this book is really not just a salutation, but a representation of those who could not articulate their stories, either because they felt too much shame or they didn't have the capacity to, they felt too silenced beyond that experience. And this book really, and again, it's not just about the representation of rape survivors or trauma survivors. For me, it's a representation of the human spirit. It's a representation of the resilience of the spirit, which every single one of us has been born with. And it's really about inspiring others to access all that is within them, including every gift, every unfulfilled dream, and the spirit of sheer resilience.
Thank you, Lynn. That was a wonderful description of the book, and it leads into what I was thinking and what I wanted as my next question, which was that the book in itself, as you say, is not about rape. And it's not only for survivors of gender-based violence. It speaks to so many other issues and general issues, I think, that people might feel shame for. And in fact, throughout the book, you littered it with a lot of other experiences in your life, aside from the rape, as when you were young and as you were growing up. So I wanted to speak about the sort of, you touched on transformation, you touched on healing, and often with books around healing and transformation, it sort of falls into a before and after category. It seems like we know that sort of the self-help industry, which is not where I put your book, but sort of falls into quick fixes. Read this book, you will get better. But what was different about your book is that it speaks of healing as a process, even in the way that the chapters are sort of designed one to the other. It's also a workbook of sorts, and you have spaces for people to fill in their own insights and their own thoughts and their own things that they're struggling with. So could you speak a little bit about healing as a process and transformation as a process, as opposed to just some quick thing that you learn or go through and then, everything's okay?
Sure. And process, it definitely is. When one is wounded, it's so important, and obviously pain produces woundedness. Unless you assume responsibility to heal, because you get to a point where you know that you don't want to live in pain permanently, and that you need to work through the pain. But you also need to know why you want to work through the pain. So it's one thing to say, I wanted to heal. It is really another thing to understand why you want to heal. Where is it that you want your healing to take you? And in this regard, I knew that I wanted my healing to take me to a space where I would be able to optimally play my role in this world. I did not quite know way back then that I was going to be a speaker and a poet and an author, but I just knew that that pain was not for nothing, could not have been in vain. So healing and transformation, they are processes, but we need to recognize our woundedness. We need to recognize our captivity. We need to be able to know where I want to go with my healing. And it was incremental, Lenina. It was not, I did a bit of therapy, but it was not therapy that healed me. In fact, each time I needed to heal a little more was also because life had wounded me a little more. And you mentioned earlier that the book is about a journey, and life really becomes a journey of a series of events, which are some traumatic, some triumphant, some a little less dramatic than others. So number one, there's no quick fixes. Number two, why is it that you want to heal? And when you know the purpose that your healing is actually going to render, even after my divorce, I felt I needed to heal even more, because then I had the status of a single parent. So my why became very, very different. I could not be wounded as a single parent, because then I would be bleeding on my innocent babies that had nothing to do with my trauma, and they were going through their own stuff already. So always we need to know and have the reason as to why we need to heal. I think also, if we never ever know what we want to transform into, we will never ever be committed to the process. And so for me, really, as much as I did not know speaker, poet, author, I knew that I just did not want to be in a state of permanent woundedness, that I didn't want to be in a state of permanent victimization. And that really propelled me towards, as incremental as it was, I also knew that I was never ever going to want to empower the damage. And one of the stuff that was held me from empowering the damage was the fact that I empowered my dreams. So I never waited to be fully healed, and I never waited to be totally fearless until I started moving forward. I moved forward and made a conscious decision to move forward despite that. And I think the fulfillment of my dreams and creating forward momentum in my life, and even being in a space where I healed others initially, because I never shared my story initially. I just became a counselor. When I did that, I was also healing others. So I think that it is a process, that it's not a quick fix, but that you don't focus. I never focused on, I want to heal every day. I just focused on who I wanted to become. And pretty much like the butterfly, it cannot break through the chrysalis without the persistence of the imaginal cells, which constitutes the new identity. And so healing really and transformation, and the two really cannot be separated. I think they inextricably linked to each other. That healing and transformation is really a result of persistently wanting to be in another state, because you know why you want to get there. And with the butterfly, it reaches a break even where there's an identity crisis between the butterfly's identity and the actual chrysalis, but it's the persistence of the cells, of the butterfly cells, that gets the butterfly cells to multiply to a point that it assumes a new identity. And that assumption of my new identity was a very, very conscious decision that really was initiated at the age of 16, where I did not want to be a victim. I did not want to be the experience. I knew that I was more than the experience. I knew that the experience was never, ever going to define me. And so the transcendence of rape is really differentiating between what has come at you and what you have experienced and who you truly are. And the one is not the other. I was more than that. And one of my current mantras is, I am more than my story. Because I am more than my story. I'm Lynn. I've grown into, I wanted to be the butterfly. I wanted freedom. I wanted freedom from woundedness. I wanted freedom from other forms of captivity in my life. And I never, ever stopped. I never stopped persisting until I reached the state. Was it easy? No. Was it worthwhile? For me to be having this conversation with you, for me to have authored the book, yes, it was worthwhile.
So Lynn, I just want to go back to your comments about being a divorced woman and the additional stigma or new stigma that came from there. There exists a societal paradox, which we obviously have to acknowledge, between the minimization of women's traumatic experiences, which is definitely seen within gender-based violence, but also in general with gender issues. For instance, there's more stigma attached to being a divorced woman than there is to being a divorced man. And you and I have had conversations about how, as women, we ourselves minimize our experiences often so that other people will not feel uncomfortable. And so when you led into how you started telling your story, so you didn't speak about the story initially, you were counseling people, you started speaking about your story, that led to the writing of your story and everything else associated with healing and transformation. And so I think what I mean is that what comes through is that in order for healing and transformation to happen, we also have to acknowledge what has happened to us. We need to let go. We need to stop minimizing, which seems like was part of your process. There was a block. There was something blocking you, and it could have been the minimization.
Definitely. I think one of the, and you're so right. My strength, in a way, however superimposed it was, even at the age of 15, and even with the second rape, it was really the superimposed strength that, while I was conscious about it, because in my strength, however superimposed and superficial, I felt that I was wanting to save my loved ones from the suffering that I was going through. So it was definitely my minimization of it was a very, very conscious minimization. Was it healthy? Is any minimization ever? No, because eventually it's going to come back to bite you. And also in my having minimized the trauma by superimposing my strength, what I actually did was I had others minimize the understanding of the effects of it. So I almost set the stage up for my own self-sabotage. I set the stage up for minimization, period. And so my strength became, however superimposed it was initially for me, it really became a misperception. And also, you know, when you are a woman and you go through trauma, there's very little space, and not just a teenager, I'm speaking as a mom, as an adult, as a professional, whatever trauma you're faced with, you almost don't have the time to entertain the trauma because there's so much to do. Whether it's single parenting, whether it is the responsibilities of your professional role, there's just so much to do. So at an unconscious level, we continue doing despite the trauma. And when I say entertain the trauma, it's not really entertaining the trauma in as much as it is acknowledging that healing needs to happen. But busyness also tends to mystify the fact that a healing process needs to happen, because the busyness becomes all-consuming. In my life, the busyness became a very conscious deflection mechanism. At the age of 15, when I went into grade, for standard 8 then, now grade 10, I busied myself as a way of denying just the level of trauma I'd been through. So a once conscientious individual became super conscientious, where, you know, my content subjects could not go any higher, but it was my denial. And 1 year later, full-blown, as in full-blown post-traumatic stress disorder set in, where every part of me just became lame again. And so, you know, throughout our lives as women, our busyness becomes a deflection. Our busyness becomes a way of coping. And eventually it catches up with you. Eventually it catches up with you. So that is the one level of minimization. I think the other level of minimization is where whatever you're going through gets minimized as an interpretation because people are just too disempowered to deal with trauma. And you can't, you know, anyone would try their best, I guess, and deal with the trauma of significant others in the best way they can. But I also do know, and not necessarily that I've been through it, I've counseled people who have been through it, where parents actually deny the fact that trauma existed because it's just too much, particularly if it's molestation, particularly if there's a stepfather or father involved. I've counseled many women and men did not feel that their trauma was respected because it was denied. And I think the denial happens for two reasons. The one is payoff, where the woman is financially dependent on the very man that is molesting her child. And the other is, what was I going to say now? The one is payoff and the other is just sheer disempowerment, just the sheerness of not knowing what to do. But that does nothing for the victim except for, and that leads to devaluation, that leads to feelings of worthlessness. Yeah.
So Lynn, as we're talking about, you are mentioning sort of denial of trauma and the effects of that. And one of the things that you have passionately spoken about is a process of choosing to live in trauma, choosing not to live in trauma, but to live through it.
Yes.
And so perhaps you could speak on the courage, I think, and the process of doing that, especially within listening to you speaking about the denial of trauma and feeling disempowered. And so I guess I'm asking for people who find themselves in that space of denial, that find themselves in that space of disempowerment, who find it difficult to sit with the pain, if you have some insights to share about that and what it takes to sort of work within that space.
I think it's a matter of the preposition, and the preposition is I chose not to live in pain, but to work through pain. So we all go through pain, Lenina. We all go through traumatic crises, some more traumatic than others. And again, you know, in my book and my philosophy is that we all have a story and no one story is more significant than the other. I don't think it's what happens to us. I don't think it's the pain itself that gets to torturously affect us in as much as it is the over-attachment to pain, the over-attachment to experiences, the over-attachment to fear. And I said earlier that I could not become the experience. I was more than the experience. The experience could not define me. I chose to be more than that. And I think this choice for me is really the differentiator here, that we choose, in choosing to not live in pain permanently, does not mean that I choose not to honor the pain. And it gets back to our previous question as well, that when we're in denial of something, or when we are deflecting, we don't get to honor it, because honoring pain and coming face to face with it, that's holy time. That takes time. It takes honesty, really brutal honesty, to say, this is what I'm feeling. And you mentioned what is it that I want to say to women today? I want to say to women and men that it's okay to feel, because we come from a scripting where, you know, when you feel, it becomes synonymous to weakness. We come from a scripting of just move on, you know, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get it out of the way. And again, that comes back to the projection of disempowerment. In getting it out of the way is not them really perhaps saying, can you just forget about it? It might just be them saying too, I can't deal with it. I'm not empowered enough to deal with it. And so my message would be, feel it and own it, even if you need to go back, because sometimes we do need to go back. I could not process all of it at 15. In fact, I didn't. In fact, I buried it in what I termed as the graveyard of my soul. I knew it was there, but it was just too much to deal with. I did not know where to begin, because my soul felt shattered, my body felt shattered, my brain literally was shattered and brutalized. So I did not know where to begin. But at some point in my life, I had to go back. And I went back when I started to realize and recognize the value of healing. I did want to know that, or I knew exactly where I wanted my healing to take me. And that was why I committed to the process. So back to the message, it is feel it, honor it, even if you have to go back. But never ever stop dreaming about your desired state. Never stop. Never make your current reality, especially if it's a traumatic one and an adverse challenge, never make it a permanent state. And two things withhold one from making anything a permanent state. It is choosing your focus. And choice and focus, when combined, really leads to the concept of perspective. And at 15 already, 16 more, I chose my perspective. I chose that I would never, ever want to live in a state of constant pain. And one of the healing mechanisms which was instant for me, Lenina, linked to perspective, was gratitude. I became grateful for the fact that I was brutalized, beaten to a pulp, drowned literally in my own blood to a point of smelling it. But I became grateful for that, in that it was 45 minutes and not 45 days. In that it could have led to my death, but it didn't. I was spared from that to share the story via a book, via my speaking. And so one of the takes on pain is really that sometimes, you know, we resist it, we deny it, but yet it has the potential to teach us. And so I had to ask, what was pain teaching me? And what through that teaching could I then transfer to others? And hence the book was a mechanism, or is a major mechanism. And so it would be, don't over-attach yourself to fear. Don't resist it, feel it, in fact, honor it. And honor it to a point that it not only teaches you, but where you become grateful for its teaching. The second is that, you know, when you become grateful for its teaching, you really change your perspective. You no longer become a victim of pain. You become triumphant because of it. And that is the space that I now assume, which was why I could write the book.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And on that note, I would like to, which I think has given us a lot to sort of conclude with on a powerful point. I would like to ask whether there are any additional comments that you would like to offer everyone out there as we conclude this conversation.
We don't always get to choose what happens to us. In fact, most traumatic experiences and most crises are not chosen, they are imposed. But we do get to choose what the rest of our life looks like. Every single one of us was given the gift of choice. We do get to choose in any single moment what we choose to empower in our lives and what we choose to disempower. One of my favorite quotations, which is a Lynn quotation, proud to say, is that at any given moment, you are never able to be in a state of two mental states. You can never be a victim and a victor at the same time. You can never be in pain, pity, and power and passion at the same time. And that implies that you have a gift of choice. And so in any given moment, however traumatic your life has been, and some of it feels so unfair, you know, because you just didn't go and ask for trauma. Trauma just happened. But if you're always going to ask, why me? You will always entertain the state of pity and the state of powerlessness. And you know, why ask questions that we might never have the answers for? And so what I chose very, very consciously to do was to make a choice that, as damaged as I felt, I would not disempower my dreams, my destiny, and that in empowering my dreams and the pursuit of my dreams, and even at 16 pursuing at all costs and saying that I would not let my dreams and my destiny be damaged, what I did by virtue of making that conscious choice was disempowering not only the perpetrator, the rapist, but disempowering the potential lifelong effects that that level of trauma could have had on me. And had I succumbed to those lifelong effects, which were so real, I would not have been able to be this conduit. I'd not have been able to share my story. And so I do believe that I was not just spared to share the story, but to share the lessons embedded in it. And that really is the representation of my book.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for having this conversation. And to end off, could you let us know where we can get Butterfly, My Soul Got Wings, What Life Has Taught Me, Book 1?
I'm proud to say that she's available in Cape Town, in the southern suburbs, the northern suburbs, and the other suburbs are yet to wake up. I'm hinting at P&A. Southern suburbs, Meadow Ridge, Rondebosch Observatory, and Plumstead. She's also available on Amazon.com in Kindle format, as well as paperback, as well as hardcover for now. And also proud to say that she is going to be available on another portal, soon to be revealed, in a different ebook format, more accessible, more affordable, because one of my highest visions is to make inspiration as accessible as possible. And for now, that's where you'll find her.
Okay, thank you so much. So this is it until our next installment. And once again, thank you for being present and having this conversation with me. It has been an honor to speak to you.
Well, thank you for having read the book, Lenina. Thank you for having reviewed it. I'm absolutely humbled. And may we have many more such conversations.
We shall. Okay then.
Thanks then.
Bye.
Bye.